Hey everyone, welcome to Conscious Conversations. Welcome back or welcome to. If you haven't been here before, it's a podcast that catches up with people who are living from a place of purpose and authenticity. And what I'm trying to do as the host is to tell their stories a little bit and work out the tools and resources that they've used and developed and, got within themselves and discovered to find that place, to find that purpose that they're living with real fulfillment. And that's what we're trying to do in life, aren't we? So it's a great podcast. It's a labor of love, and it's an extension of what I do. I'm a life coach, I'm a meditation teacher, and I work predominantly with men, in this similar space to help men step inside their authentic self, to really show up with openness, with awareness, and with intention, and using mindfulness, using meditation, and using traditional life coaching such as goal setting to help them, really discover who they are, to work through challenging times, but also with leaders and teams to grow, and from a performance perspective. I don't think you can have performance when you're not fulfilled. It's something I say a lot to people is, you could have a lot of great outcomes that people might say would give you fulfillment, but if you're not feeling fulfilled, are you really performing? And I want you to sit with that question today. If you're not fulfilled in what you're doing, are you a high performer? And if you are fulfilled, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's high performance for you. It's your path. It's your journey. I think there's so much gold in that. And today, I get the opportunity to sit down. I got an hour with a guy called Michael Escott, and he's a ripping bloke. And I loved his story. He's growing up, New York as a kid, sort of growing up there. It was a tough and challenging childhood. And talking to him about his story and how he found music as a little bit of a savior, where he found some community, in the punk scene, and, got into guitar and really, built himself up from there, but, went through his more challenging times with alcohol abuse and, some other things that were really, battling him at the time, and now has reached out and found sobriety and has found meditation. He's found yoga. He's found a spiritual practice that has grounded him back into his true self. And, Michael, in this conversation, he's a super entertaining guy. He speaks from the heart. And for all those men out there that, think that, we have to wear this armor, that we have to wear this mask, that we have to be this type of person to be successful, this guy, he talks about how short he is, but he owns it. He really owns it. And he's got huge energy. And, I just loved spending time with him. So, without further ado, this is Michael Escott. You're listening to Conscious Conversations. We've got Michael Escott on Conscious Conversations. Awesome to have you on, man. I want to start with just talking about your journey, sort of into meditation, into Buddhism, and sort of how that's come about for you, in America, and sort of how music and your lifestyle sort of played a part in that.
Totally. Well, first of all, obviously, thanks for having me on and getting this going. It's weird because it's humbling in a lot of ways to do this stuff too. Even to go into, before I get into the background of my story and everything else, and how the music scene and music industry or everything else that brought me into even where I am today as a human being. It's like, this is a good chance to kind of look back and see how that journey unfolded, and not only how it grew and is still growing, daily, which is amazing. But also just it's always been a part of me, but I never was able to see it until I actually started looking for it. And it's one of those really funny things of just how Zen even works. You know what I mean? It's like once you find it, you know what I mean? You didn't know you were looking for it, and the only way to look for it or find it is to stop looking for it, type of thing. It was crazy. But I started I've been actively in the music scene, or at least as a professional roadie is the easiest way to call it. You know what I mean? Layman's term is roadie. I always like to present myself as a touring professional. But for the last, for the last 20 years or so, that's basically what I've been doing. I've done everything from merchandising to guitar teching to tour managing entire tours, big bands, small bands, everything, stage managing, a lot of mainly on the merchandise scene, but everything was touring. Everything was all about being all over the place, and different city every day. Gone from home, 10 months out of the year straight sometimes. And even those 2 months off a year that we would get off was like, it wasn't consecutive. You know what I mean? It was like, we'd have like 4 days off here, then fly dates, and then, like weekend warrior stuff where it's like we'd have shows Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then back home for a couple days, whatever. But I started in the late 90s when I was still like I was still in high school at the time, but I started playing in a couple of punk bands, and we started getting bigger, started traveling and touring and stuff like that. And then from there on out, it branched off into me meeting other people, and other bands and stuff. And we were coming up in the scene and coming up together and doing whatever else. And then just turned into a career. It was nothing I was even looking to do other than I just knew I loved music and I didn't know what else I wanted to do. I started going to school, or after high school, I started going to college, and I was a philosophy major with a political science minor, and it didn't do me any good because as soon as that happened, I was, searching for truth in my own ways. And every professor I talked to basically was more of a roadblock than any kind of doors open. You know what I mean? Like my political science professors and stuff like that, they were like, "Are you independently wealthy?" I'm like, "No, I'm a punk rock kid, dude. Like we're working class. We do what we do." And they're like, "Well, you're never going to make it in politics. You're never going to be anything. You're never going to be anything, all that kind of stuff." And then the same thing with the philosophy courses and everything else I was taking. It was just like, it was like, you're never going to do anything with this. You're never going to, so it was weird to always get those stopping blocks. But like with the music scene, that's when I started getting offers and doors started opening up. And I was just like, I could either go to school and stay in school and get like a piece of paper and follow the rules or whatever else, or I can DIY this stuff, do it yourself, and go out on the road and just make my own life into what it was or what it is. And that's what it was. And along this time, because of my interest in, I'll call it truth seeking, I guess, for lack of a better term, really, because it wasn't like, I wasn't super religious. I was raised Catholic. In other words, I wasn't religious at all because of that. It was just like some of those aspects turned me off to a lot of things. But then I found other ways, and through the punk rock and the hardcore scene, and just touring and meeting people and doing that, that's when I found or was introduced to the Eastern side of philosophy and the Eastern religions and everything from Buddhism to Hinduism to a lot of Krishna stuff like Hare Krishnas, and there was a whole like Krishna core consciousness thing that was going on in the New York hardcore scene at the time. Bands like Shelter and really opened my eyes to just like seeing a different world, and that's when I found that my interest in that, and that's where I found that little like push to search into that stuff more often. That's where I found yoga. That's where I found meditation, and it was.
I think, mate, like people wouldn't, there's a few people that are starting to have a voice in this space, I guess, of New York, a bit of a punk rock scene, and this connection to spirituality, to Hinduism, to Buddhism, to yoga. Like you sort of, John Joseph, is being a voice in that space who talks about his work that he's done.
Yeah.
But yeah, people probably, especially in Australia, wouldn't realize that hard rock, that punk scene really was a door for a lot of people into a spiritual path.
Without a doubt. And John Joseph especially, like, the Cro-Mans were huge. I mean, like that, I loved them just like on the music scene. It was like, they're one of the, most influential hardcore bands out there, let alone New York hardcore or whatever else. And that dude, you want to talk about like a real, I'm going to swear on this a bunch too, by the way, because I'm a New Yorker at heart. But like, he's a real motherfucker. You know what I mean? Like he is true, and he's been through a lot of shit. And there's a lot of parallels. I shouldn't say a lot of parallels between his journey and mine, but like we see the similarities, and we like, regardless of like the severity of whatever we're going through, punk rock was that door of it echoes. It really does echo a lot of what, especially in Buddhism or even like self-awareness and self-exploration and self-actualization happens in the punk and hardcore scene because we're already misfits. We already don't get along. You know what I mean? We already don't fit into society as it is. And to walk into a room where, yeah, we're angry, there's aggressiveness in the music and whatever else, but there's a peace and a calm that comes at the end of that wave of rage. And that's what we latched onto. And I don't know if it was just because like our ability to seek out something that is different than the mainstream or just listen to somebody else's opinion. But that was the cool thing about punk rock and hardcore back then. It was like, and it still is now, but like I can only speak to it. I could be, when I was involved in it when I was younger, not so much now because the scenes change, rightfully so. Nothing is permanent. Everything has to have an evolution and change. But like everybody was different. There was like the jock type hardcore kid. There was these crusty punk kid with the big charged mohawks and like Liberty spikes. And then there was just the nerds. And then there was this, and there was just the artist. And then there was the drunk at the bar that was just in the bar and happened to have the show happening at the same time. And we all became into that. So we brought in all these different creative and intellectual and, and even street smarts to actual book smarts, like collective of creativity that we brought together. And it opened our eyes to everything. And there is a whole like spiritual connection between music, first of all, and, any type of music realistically to, opening up your mind, connecting with somebody else, but it's a personal journey too. So there's so many echoes and so many parallels, and it was always a beautiful thing, especially looking back on it now. It's more prevalent now than it was when I was a kid, because when I was a kid, it was just like, cool, I'm just going to go be a punk for a while. It'll be great. But,
so what was that like, mate? Like, what was the tensions that got held between really, rocking hard, really in that scene, and then this stepping into spirituality, to yoga? Like, how did they work together for you when you were younger?
I can't really speak to how everybody else was doing it, but it's interesting that all the dudes, even the guys I lost touch with back in the day, like when we were kids and just being aggressive jerks, in a lot of ways, because it was just like, rebelling a bit against anything we could rebel against, to actually finding ourselves in the same yoga studio like 10 years, 15, 20 years later. It's amazing. But how I can speak to it too is that like that was always hardcore was a positive release of negative energy. And that's really what led me to be able to connect to that sense of bliss that I would get from being when I was in a band and playing and performing on stage. Like that was my like flow moment. You know what I mean? That was my meditation. That was my thing. And the bliss that I would feel even after that, days after that, was like, it wasn't the same thing that if, like, it's similar to like a runner's high. It's similar to that kind of stuff because it is a release of all these different chemicals in the brain, adrenaline, everything. But like the calm that you would feel after that was the same thing that I feel now after a good yoga session or after a meditation, because it lets you get all the negatives just shaked out of your head. You know what I mean? Like you can see what the reality actually is, because a lot of the times we're just lying to ourselves and, or fighting just to fight. And then, how it evolved into that was like, we didn't even realize, or at least for me, I didn't realize I was doing that anyway. Like playing my guitar was my way to meditate, you know what I mean? Or writing a hardcore song was my way to meditate until I actually understood the practice, and actually sat down on a mat for the first couple of times, which was excruciating because I was still like, go, gotta keep, whatever else, gotta fight for everything. And then you find a calm at the end of that and realize, the fight, it's the journey. Yeah. And there is a fight to it. It's not about backing down, but it's about just having a clarity of walking into that. And like, for me, that was the parallel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, that it's sounding, mate, like that there was a huge, that runner's high, or that real need for high energy to find stillness and calm after that, and to find flow within that. And now that can happen from a more central place of stillness, not needing to get the runner's high to get the calm. I'm just interested, do you feel like within you there's always a want to seek truth, to sort of go against the stream of modern society? Is that innate with you?
It is. I never really thought it was. I'm actually really happy you answered or asked that question, because my answer is going to be a middle path answer too. Yes, I've always wanted to seek truth, but I always knew that I didn't whatever truth I was going to find wasn't necessarily the way it could be. Because even when I was younger, I knew that and this was almost to my detriment too. I'll get into that in a second too. But I knew one of the first things I realized when I was younger is that I'm not going to know everything, because as soon as I thought that I figured something out, there was the next level to it. The onion was peeling, dude. You know what I mean? It was just like, even if it was like playing guitar, like there was another technique that I haven't mastered yet. So as soon as I got to one level, it was like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like I got to get to that next level of playing. And yeah, it's in me to seek the truth, but to go against the stream, that's, I don't think I had a choice. When I was younger, there was a lot of, especially I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, Binghamton, New York. And it's a very interesting spot to be in, a really interesting place, because we're central in New York State itself. We're close to the PA border. A lot of people would pass through and do whatever else. But like, there was a lot of toxic masculinity growing up. And I didn't realize it at the time, but like I was always a little bit more sensitive. I was always a little bit more cautious about a lot of stuff. But I was always looking to fit in. And then I realized I'm not going to fit in because I just don't have the same views. Even when I was in Catholic school, because I was in Catholic school, you know, like the first couple of grades, you know, like, you know, from kindergarten to the first grade or whatever, and preschools and all that stuff. And I literally just didn't fit in. Part of it was a learning disability and just issues with, you know, like typical just concentration stuff or whatever. But I questioned everything, even as a little kid. And I tried not to take like I was also a prankster, kind of a jokester. And it was like, I just didn't fit in. So that was why it was like going against the stream, you know, or going against the grain in a lot of ways, because it just was. So then I embraced it and kind of ran with it. And it was like, yeah.
Well, how did that feel for you as a young kid in, you know, in New York, knowing at that age that I don't fit in?
Sucked. It sucked until wow. This is bringing up a lot of cool things. I remember I was in third grade, and it's so weird to talk about this stuff too, but it's nice to reflect back with a different mind about it. I knew I was weird because everybody told me I was weird. And I was also like, I'm short, like I'm 5'1", you know what I mean? So like everyone else around me was always bigger. So when I was a little kid, like I looked like a little kid, you know what I mean? Like I looked, when I was in third grade, I looked like I should have been in like first grade or even kindergarten. I was really small, and just, I always got picked on, and it hurt. It really hurt until I just one day was able to embrace that. And I remember being in third grade, we had to write short stories, and that was always like a funny, you know, like pun to me too. It's like short stories. It's like, well, I got that because I'm already short, you know, like making a joke of it. But there was that aspect that I always tried, being a prankster, I always tried to make fun of that. That was always like my defense mechanism too. But I remember writing a story about how to be weird. And it was an instruction manual, or like somebody could even say it was a self-help book to help other kids like embrace their weird and just be like, it's okay to do this. It's okay to do that. I do this and it's okay. I feel good at the end of the day. So as much as I was hurting, even back then, I still had that drive to like let other people know it's okay to be weird. It's okay to do this. It actually makes life a little bit more fun, because the weirder you are, the cooler everything can be in life. You can actually use your imagination to turn it into something else. So, but that was the things that secretively, like when I would go home, I would cry all the time. I would like I said, I was a sensitive kid. You know, a lot of people would say, "Oh, he's got some pussy." You know, it's like, cool. Guess what? I'm not, though. You know, like I'll fight because I have no other choice in that sense. But like, so like in around other kids, I would fight all the time, or at least fight off fights, or try to make them laugh so they wouldn't fight me. But then I would go home and it would hurt. It would hurt a lot. And that was where the dark shit, you know, definitely started popping up. But I was able to turn that off when I was around other kids and help them out. So
there's been, I feel like there's a want to help. There's been an innate want to help others.
Always
There.
Always.
And how did it feel to find? When did you find your people? When did you find that punk rock scene? What age, and what was that feeling like?
I was dude. I was 15, turning 16. All right. I was, you know, trying to get a driver's license, doing my thing. I was a metal kid. You know, I had long hair at the time. I was learning how to play guitar. whatever. And then I ran into a couple other dudes that also like was into the same kind of music, but then they were into this thing called punk, and they also skateboarded. You know what I mean? And that's what it was. I found skateboarding. I found the punk rock scene, a little bit more on the hardcore scene a couple of years later on that. And it just felt better and different. Not better. It just felt different than the punk rock or the hard rock and the metal stuff, because those dudes were like, there was something weird about it too. Like, it was a lot more nihilistic in like, the hard drink and the drugs, the women, all that kind of stuff. That wasn't really, even though I fell victim to some of that kind of stuff later in life, it was just like, that didn't turn me on as much as like seeing somebody skateboard or whatever. But I remember I was 16 years old. The first show I ever went to, and that's when I found my people, was in the hardcore scene, basically in the pits, like as we would say it, in the mosh pit. I went to a show. It was Shelter headlining. I can't remember the opening acts, but Shelter was basically like a Krishna consciousness band. It was the guys from Youth of Today, Ray Capo, and all those dudes doing that. And it was a Hare Krishna hardcore band, and that's how they started. They came out and they were chanting Hare Krishna. And I'm like, what is this shit? But then when they broke into everything, it was just like, oh my God, my mind is blown. That was the first hardcore show I went to. Then I got to see Fugazi live. And then it was the band Sick of It All from New York City that I got to see. And that's when my whole life changed. And it was like, I found those kids there at those shows. I found the kids that were skateboarding. And then I started playing music with those guys too. And we started our own little punk and hardcore bands. And that's where it was. So it wasn't until I was 15 or 16. And that's when I was the happiest in life. I know that for a fact. That looking back, it's like, that's when I really found the basis and the core of who I was, who I wanted to be, who I already was at the time. And it just made sense. And that's when I really found everybody. I found everybody in the hardcore scene and in the punk scene.
So you're 15, you're the happiest you've been?
It was the happiest I had ever been. I found the core of who I was and who I wanted to be. And it was all the same. You know what I mean? It like basically like lined up finally. And then, it was just, I could still be as different as I wanted to be, but still be accepted. Yeah. You know what I mean? I could fit in without fitting in. And that's where it was cool. And I still felt like an outsider, even in those scenes, because like humans always turn into cliques. People, we do it no matter where we're at. There's always going to be the elitists. There's always going to be the misfits and whatever. But at least in the punk and the hardcore scene, at least how I felt at the time, didn't matter. It was the diversity was embraced. And that's where I learned everything about life. As far as I'm concerned, it's just like, that's where I learned everything. You know what I mean? So like, that was the shit. That's when I found my people, so to speak, my tribe.
And how important is that, mate? Like when we think about that now with, the path you've been down, I've been down a similar path, that feeling of full acceptance of being who you are, how you are, that's in many ways, I think, what so many people are looking for.
Yeah, I agree. With everything that's going on now, from the pandemic to all the social unrest that's going on, not only in the world, but just in the States, just from looking around and feeling where I'm at, especially after being able to travel the world as often as I did and have, and in the capacity of, being not like, part of it was as a, in the music scene or, having that aspect, but not really as a tourist. A lot of the times when you travel as a tourist, quote unquote, you see like the tourist traps, you don't really get to see the culture. I was lucky enough to be embraced and brought into a lot of communities just because of like what band we were in or worked for or whatever it was. And not just the punk communities too, local punks there or that local scene, but just like even on the bigger levels, it was pretty rad. But where we're looking at from today, like we're in a really interesting spot where a lot of people have lost jobs, have lost their identity because their identity was attached to that job. I'm definitely seeing it in the music industry now. All of my friends lost their job the first week of March when everything got shut down, and we haven't been back to work since. And that's not only detrimental in so many ways of just like, well, what do I do with my time now? But it's also more people are like, if I don't do that, who am I? I am that guy that tunes that guy's guitar, or I am that guitar player on stage, or I'm the tour manager that makes all this shit happen. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, you know, we didn't think it was going to last as long as it is, but now everybody's looking for other jobs. And we're even trying to figure out, what the hell else do I want to do? I don't know how to do anything else. I've been touring for 20 years. So it's like dark night of the soul every day, because it's like, who am I without this other thing? And
so what were you doing, mate, before this? Like, you were doing tour organizations, you were managing tours?
What I was doing right before this is I actually worked for a software company called At Venue. It was an inventory control, POS, you know, credit card processing system that worked. That was a software system that basically worked for everybody from the artist to the venue to the festivals. It was a way to really integrate and normalize or streamline this, not only the settlement process between the venue and the artist, or the venue and the festival, or the festival and the artist, but also for them to be able to track their inventory, do projections, everything. It was a really cool tool. It was something that I loved using when I was actually active on the road as a merchandiser. And the company was just built by awesome people, like really good dudes, really solid company. And they offered me a job. You know what I mean? And it was rad because it was like it was a dream job. Like, they're located in Southern California, on a, you know, really small, you know, like beach city, you know, like small beach town. Always wanted to live on the beach. It's always been one of my dreams, especially in California. And it was, you know, decent pay. It was a way for me to get away from like the hustle and bustle of like Hollywood and everything else. And I could focus on just the one job. You know, when I was doing all the other jobs, it was just like, it was everything all at once. So that's what I was doing beforehand. So in other words, I was helping, here's comes the help part again. I was helping other entities help themselves. In other words, I would train them or onboard them with this use of the software system, yes, but I would also train them and guide them through how to use the system and to make sure that their job was easier by using our system. So it was rad. The cool thing is that the company was smart enough to be able to keep us afloat for a little while we, you know, waited it out basically and tried to figure things out. So, like I said, all my friends that were still touring, they all lost their job that week. You know what I mean? Had a little bit of income, maybe a couple of the bands could pay them for a little while, but without being on the road, there was no income coming in. The At Venue's income was also based on, you know, part of the touring system too. So the same kind of thing happened. We were lucky enough to stay afloat, and they did everything that they could to try to keep us all on. But unfortunately, we fell victim to layoffs as well. And then I got laid off in August. So gift and a curse in so many ways too, because it was like, wow, you know, it's so funny because I keep looking back on my meditation practice, and it was just like, I was able to see so much stuff and actually wade through a lot of this and saw the writing on the wall of like, well, you better prepare yourself. You know what I mean? I'm looking at the present moment going, this may not be here tomorrow. Take what you can, you know, and like start building up, get the savings together, you know, file for this, file for that. Just take all the measures you need to do. And at the same time, man, I'm watching and I'm listening to all my friends go through such a rough time, and they still are. And I was almost like I was prepared for it, because I went through like a lot of dark times. I already tried to get out of the industry numerous times and found another way to stay in, but stay kind of, you know, removed from it. I have my yoga practice. I have my meditation practice, and all that stuff. It's like, that's all about self-exploration. So I was able to do that. So like, and I'm not saying like things are like super easy and my life's a breeze. Like, yeah, dude, this shit is scary and hard, and I have no idea what the hell I'm going to do next either. But the difference is that like I was prepared for it because I was already doing this stuff. You know, actually, you know, you and I tried to do this earlier, you know, like a week ago, and the power went out in the neighborhood, you know, and like we had to reschedule and do it now. But I could even hear my neighbors, and this is a really funny metaphor. I could hear my neighbors in the other, you know, like other apartments around me yelling and bummed out. They're like, man, I was in the middle of that movie and I can't finish this movie now. It's like, what am I going to do now that I have no power, no way to entertain myself? And dude, I was like, I lit candles. I'm like, I'm cool. I'm just going to sit here. I'm totally fine with total silence. I'll try to do this podcast, and if it doesn't work, I'm just going to sit here. And sure enough, I just sat for the next couple of hours and just listened, observed.
Well, you know, I think globally, Michael, there's been a slowing down and a need to create some stillness and to deepen that relationship with with ourselves initially.
Yeah.
And a lot of people they haven't done the work to do that.
Right.
So this ability of now, you've got time. Some of that status and identity is being taken away, and I feel that the mental health, and we can talk about this in a minute. Some of the mental health issues, people are struggling because they're not just being hit from one area; they've been hit financially, they've been hit status, materially, and all of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of time now to sit in this.
Yeah.
And you haven't got a practice or a way to actually navigate your way through that. So again, that almost adds to the fire a little bit. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, especially we were discussing last week, mental health in America and what's happening and some of the things that you're doing in that regard.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's the thing is that like we've needed a global pause. Everyone needs a pause. You know what I mean? And it's a very interesting thing to find that balance of getting that, because we're always on the go. Constant distractions from social media to just even our own thoughts or whatever we're going to do, whether it be working out too much or drinking too much or eating too much or anything, like having sex and doing whatever else. It's like there's all these different like pleasures or external sources of entertainment or time consumption, and when all that goes away, we're left with just ourselves. And it's like that's, especially in America too, that's basically what it's all based on. Well, you know what I mean?
It's the 5 hindrances, isn't it, mate? It's like the first one's sensual desire.
Yep.
And this thing of just this is going to feel good, but it's going to bring you down one day.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, exactly it. You know what I mean? That's exactly it. It's just like it's the long haul of everything else. It's like we're so used to like the dopamine hits of like just that initial rush or the instant pleasures and whatever else. It's like that really does take a toll on everything we do, from our nervous system to just even how we can even operate within regular day stuff. It's just like, and I find myself falling victim to it too. Like, somebody will message me on my phone, and like instead of just like replying back to them, I'll reply back to them and then keep scrolling on Instagram sometimes until they reply. And it's just like, well, there goes my whole day. You know what I mean? In whatever, it's the distractions. But we definitely needed a pause, dude. And I think a lot of people, like you said, it's not just hitting us financially and like status wise or whatever, but it's like we're also starting to realize that a lot of the shit we thought was really important simply isn't. We don't need it, man. And that's hard for a lot of people to deal with. And even me, like I find that stuff too. It's like I don't really need like the coolest car in the world, but I still would like a nice look. It's like, well, it's good to be nice and whatever. It's a toy, but what realistically, it's like I don't even need half of the stuff that comes with that specific car. It's like it's more so what's the practicality? I just need it to get me from point A to point B and then back to point A. That's really it. Or like, do we need 6 TVs in every room? No. What if your power goes out? Wait, why do you have 6 TVs in 6 rooms? So there's so many other aspects of it too, but like the priorities are starting to shift. And it scares a lot of people. And, and it's like without being able to take that pause for yourself, I don't know if a lot of people are able to even find those answers and even really realize what's going on with themselves. So it's like, we needed it. It's cool that it happened. It sucks the way that it happened, but I think it was like, there's a lot of positivity that can come out of a time like this. A lot of it. We're starting to see it. We only hear about the negative shit. We really do. Because it's important to talk about the negative stuff too. Because like, it's not about, that's the weird thing. Like, even like if we're going to go back to John Joseph and stuff like that, when it comes to like the PMA, the positive mental attitude, a lot of people get that wrong, dude. You know, it's like it's not about just like everything. I'm only going to see the positive. It's like, no, you acknowledge the negative, but understand what the lesson is underneath it, or how that discomfort or dis-ease is going to heal you and or help you grow into the next step. You know. Yeah, so
I feel like the PMA stuff, it's a reframe. Like it's a chance to build a relationship with the moments, to sit in that shit for a little while, right? But be okay with it, going against the stream, just to sit in it, but then learn, grow, and be positive from it, and be intentional about that.
Yeah.
But it's like that law of attraction. Everyone sort of thinks that if I just do the PMA, my life will be perfect all the time and I won't struggle, I won't have challenges, and everything's going to be great and I'll have abundance.
Yeah.
And that's not life.
No, it's not. The thing is, where I've noticed that with too, is that what the key was for me is that, like, it's not the once this happens, then everything will be okay. It's understanding that it already is okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that was the first like dude moment that I ever really had. You know, it's like, it's funny. My first like sober coach, because I'm sober now, and I've been sober for like 7 years, and that's also a big part of my, you know, like my journey and everything too. But my first sober coach, like, he would call them dude moments. A lot of people would say like aha moments, but we were always like, dude, you know, like that's where it's at. And that was one of the first ones that he said to me. He's always got nuggets of wisdom. Dave Sherman, look him up. He's amazing. Especially if you need help, call him all the time. Doesn't matter what time of the day it is. Just keep calling him. He loves it. He would say, not only is everything going to be okay, but it already is okay. And if you actually can see that it is, you know, like, it does take a good practice to be able to have that awareness where you can step back and observe everything. It actually is okay. It doesn't, and it's not taken into light the severity of whatever the situation is, because things can be really, really, really messed up for a lot of people. But just knowing that, like, there still is something that is okay in the situation, that's key to moving on. You know, and that's another big part of the law of attraction, or even the PMA stuff. So it's the acceptance of it.
And it's like, when I hear you say that, mate, I go for a walk in nature, and I look at the trees, and there's it's a spiritual practice for me.
Yeah.
And it costs me nothing, and it's on my doorstep. But I'm like, if I went overseas, you know, if I paid thousands of dollars for a car, would I be happier than I am now? Just sitting in nature, listening to the birds and the trees. Is that material, is that job going to make me happier than I could be within this moment? Mm-hmm. And knowing that, for me, is knowing that that's available to me with each breath, with each look at a tree, with each sky. I can generate the same amount of happiness in that moment that anything material will ever give me. Yeah. And it's quite empowering, because you don't need the external to cultivate the joy within. It's there.
Well, that's another great point. I think it's interesting, because you are looking at somebody might even say you are looking at an external aspect, nature. Okay. But then that actually is an internal aspect. We are part of nature. We didn't come into this world. We came out of it. You know what I mean? Like there's a whole thing that we always forget, and the disconnection happens. Maybe it's from urbanization or, you know, whatever. But like, if you're thinking about getting that cool ass job, you know, which brought me down to where I'm at too, because I'm reflecting on my actual experience down here, versus, you know, or having that cool car, or just sitting on the beach, or going out and, you know, looking at a tree. You know, what is the difference between the two? And here's what I found. Let me backtrack real quick. I was having a freak out moment one day, and I called my buddy Dave, and I said, dude, something's wrong. I don't know what's wrong. Something's wrong. I'm freaking out. Something's wrong. And he goes, all right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go down for a walk on the street. Just go out and walk. I want you to find a tree, take a picture of it, and send it to me. And I'm like, what the fuck? You're an ass. Why? Why would you make me do this? And sure enough, I did it. By the time I found the tree that I thought was cool enough to send him, I sent it to him. And then I just realized, wait, I'm already calm. Everything already is okay. The lesson he was trying to show me is that, like, it didn't matter, it just, I needed to find that connection and just find a tree, whatever. Part of the thing for that too was also just what was wrong with me in that anxiety attack I was having, a panic attack I was having, was because everything already was okay. There was nothing for me to fix. There was no problem. I was just bored. But because of my personality, the job that I was working, in the music industry, it's always go, 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 go. Because I had nothing to do, I was freaking out thinking I did something wrong. So let's fast forward to me getting this cool job, driving this cool car, being in this cool small beach town. I've been praying for, asking for, and trying to manifest, or just wanting serenity for so long. And then by taking this job and coming down and living in this small town, I finally got it. And I didn't know what the hell to do with it until I walked to the beach every day and just sat in the sand and listened to the waves crash. That was cooler than having the job.
Yeah.
And that's really what it was all about. It wasn't about the job. I was stoked on it, and it still am. It sucks that, it didn't work out, but the beach was always there. And that's the thing. And that's where I felt the real connection. A lot of us, we are too, in it. I don't even want to say it's our own fault for whatever. Yeah, a lot of it is, but we don't realize that we're not a part of nature. We are we're not apart from nature. We are part of nature. That tree, that sand, the water, the air we breathe, the carbon dioxide, the oxygen, everything that goes through and whatever, it's all part of the same system. And we're a part of that too. We came out of it, man. That was the biggest, my eye-opening thing for me. And it's what I go back to all the time too. I think a lot of us need that.
Yeah, man. I think it's so important, and I remember I did a 2-year course on eco-psychology, and I just remember the one thing that they sort of said was that everything is connected, and nothing on this planet, nothing on this earth can grow in isolation.
Right.
So there's always a connection to something. There's a relationship to something. So, even our thoughts are connected to something. They don't come out of nothing.
True. Yeah.
And it's the building the relationship to that in a healthy way, which is, we're talking here, and so much of this conversation is around you helping others. And then, I'd be interested to how that's gone for you now with not having the job. And is it ever that story you're saying, is it ever an unhealthy relationship to you wanting to help?
Oh, it can be. I like that one too. That's all right. Even going back, how we even talking, when I was starting to talk about even when I was in 3rd grade, and I'm already trying to help kids out. I've always been that soul, but I've helped myself out of these holes because I helped somebody else. Yeah. Especially with, being involved in the AA scene, the Alcoholics Anonymous scene. It's really based around service. Buddhism is also based around being of service. And that's where the connection really comes in. How does that become detrimental to somebody else's health? I've also been the martyr. I've also been the guy that puts myself last. And I think that's an interesting balance that I'm even learning, because I've gone out of my way. I still do, I also teach meditation, in certain circles. A lot of it's either donation based or even just somebody that hits me up and wants to learn how to meditate or even get sober. That's usually where my go-to is too, because meditation and prayer is also a really big part of recovery. It's a way to find yourself, but also to connect to others and so on and so forth. But when all that stuff happens, especially at the beginning, what's my free time? Where's my practice? Doesn't matter. I'm here to help you. And by helping you, I will become absolved from my sins or however that is. And that's where it becomes, can become dangerous, because what I've been saying since this pandemic started too, it's you got to remember, you got to put your own oxygen mask on first before assisting others. You're on a flight, man. And the flight is called planet Earth. You know what I mean? And that's what we got to do. We can't help somebody else off if we're weak. And that's where mental health comes into play. That's where self-care comes into play. but then it doesn't stop there. It has to extend to somebody else. That's where your empathy grows. That's where your connection grows. And that's what's been key to me. So like what I've been doing since I've been down here, because even before the pandemic hit, I ran into some health issues. The relationship that I was in was also on the rocks. It ended up not working out, which was heartbreaking in a lot of ways. But again, because of my practice and her practice and everything else that we had too, we ended up, it was as good of a split can be. It was a good split. But like there was a lot of time where it was like, shit, I really got to figure out what's going on. And here I am in this perfect place of isolation. So I was able to do that isolating first. And then the pandemic hits and it's like, I was just about to come out and start getting to know people and do the thing. And I can't now. And everybody's locked up. But that's where the other connection happened, where I had my buddies that were calling me going, dude, I don't know what to do with myself. Teach me how to meditate because I don't know how to, and freaking out. That's where it happened. But again, it's like knowing that I have to have my own boundaries set up and know where my practice is and make sure my practice is on point. That's where I can help somebody else after that. But that also goes from another, that also just goes from knowing what I've learned. I've also learned so much more from everybody else. Some of the people that I'm quote unquote teach me more than anything. You know what I mean? Because we're reflections of each other too, in so many ways. And that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's so true, man. It's so true. And I think, I'd love to, how, when you were going through, your alcohol struggles,
yeah,
what was that like for you to have to ask for help?
That was the hardest part. It still is. I am still such a stubborn pain in the ass when it comes to trying to ask for help. But that was it, man. And that's really the only reason why I was drinking anyway, is because I didn't know how to ask for help in the first place. Because I had that false PMA. I was strong. You know what I mean? It's like I don't need this shit. I could get through this my own. This is fantastic. And all I did was drink more. You know what I mean? It was fake. It was all fake. But the alcohol, whether it led to my demise or the demise happened and then the alcohol tried to mask it, doesn't matter to me anymore. I don't care what the source of it was. I know what the source of it is. The source of it was, when I was in third grade and people were picking on me. Duh. You know what I mean? That's where it happens. But it went away when I was 15 or 16. And then cool, when I was in my 30s and I decided to get sober, I went back to the mentality of being 15 or 16, but in a good way. And then I rebuilt and whatever. But like asking for help is the hardest part, especially for that it was for me. For some other people going through recovery or having some kind of behavior issue or substance abuse issue or whatever it is, it's usually the acknowledging it or admitting that you have a problem is also the same thing as asking for help. You know what I mean? And it's just accepting where you're at with that. It's like, it's weird because a lot of the shame always comes up for me, shame and guilt. And the guilt is I always feel guilty when I'm doing well because I know other people in the world aren't doing well. And I will always have that issue with it. And it's something I'm working on now, but that also comes up with having to ask for help and not being able to, and especially even having that martyr complex of like, I have to sacrifice everything for myself for the betterment of somebody else. When realistically, I just have to help myself a little bit first, and then you help somebody else, and it just kind of snowballs or trickles up or builds up upon that. But for my story on that, I still remember the day that I just couldn't do it anymore. You know what I mean? And that was like the rock bottom. And it was like, it was the darkest. Yeah, it was probably one of the darkest days of my life. I can only remember one other day that was close enough to it. And it was a similar situation. It was a similar, like, whatever. Make a really long story short, I came back from a tour. I went into a little bit of an isolation type of thing because every time I would come home from a tour, I never told anybody when I would come home. I would just show up somewhere. Instead of being like, yo, I'll be home on the 5th. It's like, I didn't tell anybody I would fly home on the 5th. I wouldn't come out of my hole for a little bit. There was some decompression that needed to happen, whatever. I did all that. But met up with a buddy of mine and he's, I already told myself I wasn't going to drink anymore. You know what I mean? I was going to try to beat the thing on my own. And, Buddy of mine said, nobody's seen you yet. Everybody's asking if you're going to, because they knew you'd be home soon, that kind of thing. Come out with us tonight. And I'm like, all right, I'm only going to go out for one. Famous last words for everybody ever. And, you know what I mean? And sure enough, I drank my way through a couple of bottles of booze at a bar, you know what I mean, at one bar. And then when that bar closed down, we walked to another bar that was going to be open after hours because we knew the bartender there. So it was like bartender specials, and we would party. We partied until the sun came up. I drank another bottle there too. Everybody else was partying. I was straight up punishing. I was just in that world of just like whatever. And I remember going through another bottle there, basically by myself, way too much booze. Thank God I didn't drive anywhere, but I ended up walking around my hometown for hours on end. And I don't even know how many hours. I just know it was like late morning or almost early afternoon by the time I got back to my apartment. And I passed out on the can't remember. Honestly, I can't remember if it was the kitchen floor or the living room floor. It doesn't matter because it was like hiccup of the same day. But all I remember was coming to, still being drunk, but then basically just reaching for my phone and calling my buddy Dave, who I was denying that I needed help to for years at that point. And I just said, I don't know how to stop, dude. And then that was it. He's like, well, this is how we do it. You made the phone call, and then this is what we're going to do. And he gave me a plan and, started talking to him once a week, going to AA meetings, whatever else. I already knew about actually refuge recovery, and the Dharma, recovery Dharma is what's out there now too. It's like all the Buddhist 12-step programs that I was finding, I already knew some of them exist or were just in their infancy. So I was already plugged into that because that was my go-to anyway. But still that day, dude, and even I'm getting a little emotional just thinking about it too, because it was like that could have ended a different way. I could have been dead that day, and I definitely had the thoughts. I'm surprised that I didn't get hit by a car because I blacked out. I don't remember walking around town. I remember a couple of things that are like, oh shit, was that day? But I remember there was a bridge involved over a river. You know what I mean? Definitely had the thought to jump. Didn't, thank God. But, there was a bunch of all of those other things that really could have ended differently. But it was just, there was something else there that just said, nah, dude, ask for help. And it's still, like I said, I am getting emotional thinking about it too, because I almost didn't ask for help. So.
And you were saying last week, man, there's, some of the support you're giving at the moment. There's there is that high amount of people not asking for help and actually taking the other course.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's from the people that I'm involved in locally. Well, it's actually internationally and stuff. Nationally and even internationally, there's some people I talk to that are overseas that we do Zoom meetings where there'd be AA or meditation practices or whatever else, just to talk. We've lost a lot of people. There, especially, it's everywhere in the world, but I'm concentrating on the U.S. right now with all this stuff. It's suicide rate is up, alcoholism is up, no matter what. And then in the scenes too, it's we've lost so many people. Either they relapsed and they OD'd through other substances and narcotics, or they got drunk again and drove home and killed themselves or killed somebody else in a car, or just straight up killed themselves, committed suicide, whatever. All that shit's happening, and it's the numbers are jumping up. Even from a year ago at this time, even before March, dude, it was we'd get a couple here and there because, man, alcoholism and substance abuse in general is just it's a baffling disease. Man, it takes a lot of people, but it's it's hard. It's hard. And knowing that I get those phone calls from my buddies that have those thoughts, and thank God they're calling me. And, that's, I make a joke about getting calls at 3:00 in the morning and how much of a pain in the ass it is. But man, I would rather get a call at 3:00 in the morning and talk to a dude for, however long he needs to talk to or she needs to talk to me, to stop him from doing that, to realize that it does get better. And it's just nothing is permanent, dude. Even the worst thing in the world, even the worst thing that could ever happen to you, it's not permanent. You know what I mean? Something else, there's going to be another flip. There's going to be another flip. Even death itself is not, not the end. Especially in the Buddhist perspective, but it's another gateway, but.
Man, like before we finish, like what's next for you then? You know, you're here, you're in this beautiful beach town. You know, what what's it feel like?
That's the thing, dude. I have no idea. This is there's for those that don't meditate, especially when it comes to like from the Buddhist perspective of stuff or whatever. There's a the thing that's or the term that is called beginner's mind, and you approach every aspect in life, or especially your meditation practice, with beginner's mind, like it's the first time you ever did it. That is humbling experience, a humbling experience. And that's exactly how I'm facing every day, because I have absolutely no idea what's headed next. I'm interviewing for other jobs, but at the same time, I'm building my own practice again. Like there was a conscious decision of like, I shouldn't say it was a decision. It was more so another contemplation of my insecurities getting the better of me and saying, I don't really know how to help people because I need help right now. But I came to the conclusion of like, that's exactly why and how I can help other people, because I also need the same help that I'm going to be offering to somebody. And it's better to go in it hand in hand, as maybe one good dude guiding one day or the other girl guiding the other day. That's the way that we're going to get through all this is together. So what's next for me is I'm already getting enough calls and enough other things where it's like, that's going to be, I'm starting my own thing. I'm going to open up my private practice again too and start guiding and teaching some people, whether it be donation or just even pro bono and just doing that. I'm also in a yoga teacher training. It's been long enough that I've been putting that off for a long time. It was always my practice, you know what I mean? Like, and it was something just for me. But then I realized the same kind of, sentiment carries over in that whole scene too, where it's like, now it's time to guide and teach other people. So that's going to be something happening as soon as that thing's over. I'll be certified, and then I'll keep studying and get, I'm doing my 200 hours now. I'll do my 500 hours after that. But as for where I'm going to be, no idea. This is like the make or break week for me. So I may still be here in California, or who knows where I'll be in another month, wherever the world is going to take me. But the cool thing about it is instead of, I'm turning that fear into excitement. You know what I mean? That insecurity that we all feel in the unknowing, in the uncertainties of life is actually, I'm able to flip that. Not always. It's still scary as shit, and I still sit there. But I remember that the fear is actually there to protect me. And I just say, oh, dude, thanks for being here. Thanks for showing me that I'm nervous as hell about this, and I don't know which direction to go in. But I'm going to turn it into, why not? Let me try doing this. I'll apply for jobs. I'm applying for jobs I never thought I'd apply for, ever. Also finding out that I'd rather work for myself anyway, and I'll keep building that slowly. But yeah. So that's it.
Mate, that's awesome. And I love it. I love the chat. I think we'll have to do this again. It's been awesome. I feel that the future is going to be around helping in service to others. That's obviously the common theme in your life. And there's probably a feeling of you having control of that service is where you want to go.
Yep.
And to do it on your terms, which is a beautiful thing, mate.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. And it's coming full circle. It's never gone away. It's always been here. Why not embrace it for once, So that's what I'm doing.
Nate, we'll talk soon, but thanks so much. That was an awesome conversation. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too, man. Seriously.